Serena shielded her eyes against the brilliant midday glow. On Aurora Isle, the sun never set. Every hour was bathed in golden light, an endless summer afternoon engineered by science. Tourists lounged on pristine beaches under palm-like flora, sipping bright cocktails, no matter the hour. Children laughed and dashed across the sand, playing games in what passed for evening, though the sun still hung high and bright. Today the resort prepared for its grandest celebration, the annual Festival of Eternal Sunlight. Colourful streamers and holographic lanterns swayed between coconut palms, and upbeat island music drifted from hidden speakers. The festival marked 10 years since Aurora Isle's sky had last known darkness. Serena moved through the crowds of vacationers and staff, a tablet in hand as she double-checked environmental readings. As the chief systems engineer, it was her job to ensure the orbital mirrors and geosolar arrays that banished the night remained perfectly aligned. 10 years of flawless daylight, she mused. At the beachside pavilion, Serena found her friend Mira, directing workers who arranged tables of tropical fruits and delicacies for the celebration. Mira gave Serena a quick, excited smile. "How are the systems, sir? Our everlasting sun still behaving?" Serena nodded and showed her tablet display. "All optimal. The orbital reflectors are steady. We won't have so much as a cloud for our festival." Mira sighed in relief. "Good. I'd hate for anything to spoil tonight. We've promised our guests the party of a lifetime." As Mira hurried off to handle another task, Serena lingered a moment, gaze drifting up to the sky. It was a flawless expanse of deep blue, yet her eyes caught a flicker, just a brief stutter in the sunlight. She frowned and adjusted her tablet to check the solar intensity readout. The line remained flat, no dip, no anomaly. Perhaps a momentary sensor glare or a glint off one of the orbital mirrors. She gave the sky one last searching look, but saw nothing unusual now. With a shake of her head, Serena dismissed it as nerves. By late afternoon, the Festival of Eternal Sunlight was in full swing. Laughter and music mingled with the crash of gentle waves. Serena allowed herself a rare moment off duty to enjoy the festivities. She and Mira joined a circle of dancers on the sand. The air smelled of roasted sweet fruit and salty sea breeze. Even Serena's perpetual caution melted away in the joy of the celebration. After all, what could go wrong on a day that never ended? A sudden hush fell over the beach. The drummers slowed, then stopped. Confused, Serena followed everyone's gazes upward. Her heart skipped a beat. High above, the radiant sky was dimming. It was as if an immense shadow crossed the sun. Gasps rose from the crowd. Daylight, constant and unwavering for a decade, was fading. Serena's mouth went dry. An eclipse. Here. No schedule or warning. An Aurora Isle shouldn't have any celestial bodies capable of blocking the sun, but there, unmistakable against the diminishing glare, hung a massive black sphere. It slid further over the sun's face with each passing second. Mira was at Serena's side now, clinging to her arm. "What is that? Is this part of the show?" Her voice trembled. Serena could only shake her head, eyes locked on the sky. The black sphere was featureless, perfectly round, and growing as it devoured the sun's disk. Within half a minute it covered the sun completely. A ring of fire glowed around the silhouette, an eerie halo casting Aurora Isle into twilight. Screams broke the silence. A child started crying in fear at the sudden darkness. Others stood frozen, as if disbelief would halt this impossible dusk. Serena's training jolted her into action. "Everyone, please, stay calm," she shouted, pulling free from Mira's grip. "Move away from the beach and toward the main hall." Her words were nearly drowned in rising panic. The resort's emergency lights along pathways automatically flickered to life, casting long shadows over the trembling crowd. A pre-recorded safety announcement began playing over the loudspeakers, urging guests to remain calm and follow staff instructions. As Serena helped herd a group of stunned tourists off the sand, she risked another glance upward. The black sphere hung centered over the sun, unmoving. This was no brief flash or glitch. It felt deliberate, like an eye staring back at her. She suppressed a shudder and focused on guiding people indoors. Then, almost as abruptly as it began, it was over. A sliver of sunlight blazed out from one edge of the black disk, bright enough that several people cried out and covered their eyes. The sphere was moving past. Within moments, direct sunlight flooded down again, harsh and blinding after the dimness. In the returning brilliance, the beach was a tableau of frightened faces. Some guests murmured in confusion. A few laughed nervously, trying to brush it off as a rare cosmic event or an unscheduled special effect. Serena knew better. She met Mira's eyes, finding her own alarm reflected there. Over the speakers, the resort manager's shaken voice announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for that unexpected eclipse. Everything is under control. Please, enjoy the festival." But the jubilant mood had evaporated. Serena stood in the reborn sunlight, heart pounding. She could still feel a chill where the shadow had touched her skin. In 10 years of maintaining the sun's satellites, she had never seen or heard of any eclipse like this. Whatever that black sphere was, it did not belong. As music tentatively started up again, and staff attempted to soothe the guests, Serena clenched her tablet to steady herself. Darkness had come to Aurora Isle, if only for a minute, and a distant, long-buried instinct within her stirred in response. Something was wrong, and deep down, she feared the brief night was only the beginning. After the eclipse, an uneasy tension clung to Aurora Isle. Though sunlight returned, guests retreated to their villas early. Staff encouraged everyone to remain indoors, as a precaution. The Festival of Eternal Sunlight effectively ended the moment darkness fell. Its cheerful lanterns were now futile pinpricks against the encroaching gloom. In the resort's control center, Serena pored over data streams with a pounding heart. The orbital reflectors, normally redirecting sunlight to banish night, were failing to provide light. "Something is blocking the source," she murmured to her colleague Dev. On a monitor, a schematic of the system displayed a new obstruction at the inner Lagrange point, an unknown mass directly in the sun's path. The massive black sphere had taken station where it could interrupt Aurora's engineered day. The control room lights flickered as automatic systems switched to nighttime mode for the first time in 10 years. A soft chime announced, "Attention, evening cycle initiated." Exterior illumination on through the window. Floodlights along pathways blinked to life, casting pale cones across the gardens and beach. The artificial lights looked feeble compared to the lost brilliance of day. Resort manager Hal Voss paced behind them, barking into a comm unit. "I don't care if it's never happened before. Get me someone at orbital control now. We need that object identified and removed." His voice carried barely controlled panic. Communications were spotty. Perhaps the sphere interfered with those too. "As long as our generators hold, we can keep the lights on all night," Serena said, trying to sound confident. Inside, she felt a childhood fear stirring. She had grown up hearing only stories of nighttime. Now it was here, real and unfiltered. Outside, an unnatural quiet blanketed the grounds. In their villas, guests bolted doors and peered through windows at a sky full of unfamiliar stars. Staff on patrol clutched flashlights, their beams slicing through dense shadows at the resort's edges. Near midnight, Serena stepped out of the control center for a breath of air and immediately tensed. The world was profoundly dark beyond the pools of electric light. Palm trees and buildings cast long, inky shadows. The ocean was a black sheet, its gentle hiss the only sound. So this is night, she thought, both awed and uneasy. A security guard, Kamau, crossed the courtyard on patrol and gave Serena a nod. He had been on Aurora Isle long enough to remember real nights. Strange times, eh? He muttered. She nodded. Strange. I never thought I'd see this here. Kamal's gaze drifted past the fences into the tree line. Keep indoors if you can. Night has its own surprises. His cryptic tone sent a chill up Serena's spine. Before she could ask, his radio crackled and he moved off to investigate a report near the North Beach. In one of the private villas, Danilo, a tourist who arrived only yesterday, found himself too restless to sleep. The novelty of a true night sky proved irresistible. Ignoring the staff's warnings, he slipped out onto the deserted beach to stargaze. He walked along cool sand, marveling at how the ocean glimmered under faint moonlight. The unfamiliar darkness felt tranquil. As he wandered farther from the resort lights, the sounds of distant music and generators faded, leaving only surf and breeze. A soft voice carried on that breeze. Danilo! He stopped, thinking he imagined it, but then, from the direction of the palm grove at the beach's edge, a figure emerged. Danilo squinted. It looked like a woman stepping out of the trees, her form slight and draped in shadow. Relieved to see another person, he raised a hand. Hello, were you calling me? She approached with slow, graceful steps. Starlight revealed long dark hair and unusually pale skin. Danilo didn't recognize her as a guest or staff. Perhaps she came from a neighboring resort. Danilo, the woman said again softly. The way she spoke his name felt oddly intimate, as if they were old friends. A warning prickle ran through him. Do I know you? He asked, voice low. The woman smiled. In the gloom he glimpsed teeth, a lot of them, and eyes that shone with a faint golden light. Something was wrong with her eyes. Danilo's breath caught. Every instinct suddenly told him to step back, to run. His heel dug into the sand as he backed up. I should go, he mumbled, heart thudding. The stranger tilted her head. Even as Danilo turned, she closed the distance between them in an eye blink. Cold fingers latched around his wrist. He yelped in surprise. Her grip was like iron, thin hand belying unnatural strength. Stay, she whispered. Her voice was gentle, polite, and completely at odds with the bruising hold she had on him. Danilo tried to shout, but she pressed a finger to his lips with her free hand, impossibly fast. Up close, her face was inches from his. Those eyes were definitely glowing, twin golden orbs, reflecting his terrified expression. No need to shout, she cooed. We're all alone here. Trembling, Danilo mustered his strength and yanked back. For an instant, her grip slackened and he stumbled free, falling to the sand. Sucking in a breath, he tried to scream for help. In a flash, the woman was on him, smile never wavering. Danilo's cry was cut off as his head struck the ground with a thud. Stars danced in his vision. The last thing he saw was her face above him, gold eyes filling the world, and that too wide smile. Much later, Serena would review the security footage from the North Beach. All it showed was a brief, grainy glimpse of Danilo on the sand, and a second shape rushing toward him, before the camera cut to static. By dawn, Danilo's villa was found empty, his bed unslept in. He was the first, though not the last, to vanish into the new night. Morning light returned to Aurora Isle, but it brought little comfort. A heavy unease hung over the resort as staff quietly spread word. A guest was missing. At dawn, Serena and a few others combed the North Beach where Danilo was last seen. Half buried in the sand, they found a few personal items, a sandal, a spilled drink, but no sign of the man himself. What they did find were signs of a struggle, scuffed sand, broken foliage, and a palm frond stained with blood. Serena's heart pounded as she showed the bloodstain to Kamau. He grimly confirmed it was human. Mira, standing nearby, turned pale. Before panic could take root, manager Hal Voss stepped in. He ordered the staff to keep the discovery quiet. To the guests, Danilo would simply be an early departure on this morning's ferry. Serena clenched her jaw at the lie, but she understood his aim, preventing chaos. As the group dispersed, Serena lingered with Kamal. Something attacked him, she whispered, eyes on the dark patch soaking into the sand. Kamal nodded, face drawn. In the old days, before eternal daylight, now and then people vanished at night. We pretended it was accidents, but I always suspected other things. He trailed off, scanning the tree line, as if expecting to see eyes staring back. He placed a firm hand on Serena's shoulder. Stay in the light tonight. If you hear someone call your name from the dark, don't answer. Those unsettling words stayed with Serena throughout the day. The resort struggled to maintain a facade of normalcy. Most guests remained oblivious to the danger, lounging by the pool or taking guided tours under the still brilliant sun. Behind the scenes, Hal had arranged emergency shipments of high-powered floodlights. By late afternoon, staff set up clusters of them around the resort, along the beaches and at the jungle's edge, ready to switch on at sundown. When the second night fell, Aurora Isle was pierced by beams of artificial brilliance. Pools of harsh white light dotted the grounds, pushing back the darkness, yet shadows still gathered in the gaps between lamps. Serena volunteered to stay with a group of guests in the main hall, keeping them calm with indoor activities as an excuse to stay safely under the lights. Laughter was strained, conversations hushed. A little after 9 p.m, a sharp pop echoed across the resort, and one sector went dark. A floodlight by the South Gardens had blown out. Two maintenance workers, Owen and Talia, went to replace it. Serena watched their flashlights bob into the darkness and felt a stab of apprehension. Minutes passed. The light was still out, and Owen and Talia had not returned. The patch of unlit garden gaped like an open mouth at the edge of the grounds. Serena's worry spiked. She grabbed a flashlight from an emergency kit and slipped out, telling Mira to keep everyone inside. Outside, the night was thicker than before, as if the darkness had substance. Serena hurried along the path toward the South Garden, flashlight beam cutting ahead. "Owen? Talia?" she called softly. No reply. She found the toppled floodlight stand, its bulb shattered. Nearby lay Owen's toolbox, its contents scattered. Her pulse racing, Serena swept her light over the shrubbery. A faint rustle sounded from the dense foliage. She caught a glimpse of movement, someone stepping out from behind a palm trunk. Relief flickered as she recognized Talia's uniform. "Talia," Serena hissed. "Are you hurt? What happened?" The figure turned toward her, face still in shadow. "Serena," the woman's voice answered, soft and oddly affectionate. Something in that tone stopped Serena cold. It sounded like Talia, but wrong. She lifted her flashlight, illuminating her colleague's face, and felt ice in her veins. Talia's eyes glinted, an unnatural amber gold in the light. Her expression was a wide, frozen grin that did not belong on the practical, shy mechanic Serena knew. Serena took a step back. "Talia," she repeated uncertainly. The woman cocked her head, smile unwavering. "We've been waiting for you," she said in Talia's familiar gentle voice. Yet the words felt predatory. Behind the woman, deeper in the foliage, another shape shifted. Tall, gaunt, with eyes glimmering golden like an animal in the dark. Serena realized with dawning horror that it was using Talia's voice, and whatever lurked behind it might be wearing Owen's form, or worse. Every muscle in Serena's body screamed to flee, but fear held her rooted. The golden-eyed figure that looked like Talia took a single step forward, reaching out a pale hand. "Come here, Serena," it whispered. A guttural hiss from the taller shape broke the spell. Serena jerked into motion, snapping her flashlight beam directly into the creature's eyes. The thing shrieked, a high, inhuman sound. Its smile vanished, lips peeling back to reveal too many teeth. It stumbled backward, arms raised to block the light. For a heartbeat, Serena saw its true face. The illusion of Talia flickered, revealing greyish skin, stretched taut over a bony frame, and eyes like molten gold. With a cry, Serena turned and ran. Branches whipped at her as she fled the garden path. Behind her, the shriek rose again, filled with rage. She burst onto a lit walkway and nearly collided with Kamal and two other guards sprinting toward the noise. There, Serena gasped, pointing wildly. In the bushes, it looks like Talia, but it's not her. From the blackness, several pairs of golden eyes appeared at the tree line, just beyond the reach of the light. Serena's blood ran cold. The strangers stood as silhouettes in the dark, and faintly on the breeze, she heard her name in a chorus of whispers. Serena. Serena. Kamal squeezed the trigger. A shot cracked through the night, then another. Inhuman screeches answered from the darkness. The eyes vanished as suddenly as they'd appeared. A tense silence fell. Serena's breaths came in short gasps. The group slowly backed away toward the brighter plaza, keeping the lights trained on the trees until they reached safety. Only then did Serena notice what lay near the broken floodlight. Two crumpled shapes were dragged partially into the hedge. Even from a distance she recognized the uniforms. Owen and Talia's bodies were motionless, and the way they lay told Serena there was no saving them. A strangled sob caught in her throat. Kamal put a steadying hand on her shoulder. His face was grim in the glow of the remaining lights. "Inside now," he said quietly. "We regroup and warn the others. The night isn't over yet." Serena allowed herself to be guided back to the main hall, heart hammering. The golden-eyed strangers had shown themselves at last. Whatever they were not human, and they were hunting in the dark. Dawn of the third day revealed the full horror. Serena stood in the infirmary, trembling as she stared at the mutilated bodies of Owen and Talia, throats torn open, chests clawed apart, gore that left no doubt something inhuman had killed them. Hal turned away to vomit, while Mira sobbed quietly at Serena's side. The fragile notion of wild animals as the culprit evaporated. These wounds were too vicious, too cruel. Hal Voss pressed a cloth to his mouth and turned away, heaving. The resort manager had insisted on seeing the victims, perhaps to convince himself of the real danger. Now he staggered to a chair, wiping sweat from his brow. We need off-island evacuation immediately, he croaked. I've sent urgent distress signals. They claim help is coming, but... He didn't finish. They all understood. Help, if it was on the way, might not arrive today. How many of those things are out there? Mira whispered, standing close to Serena. Mira's eyes were red-rimmed, terrified. She hadn't left Serena's side since the night's events. At least 5 we saw, Serena said quietly. Maybe more. They're strong, fast, and they look like us. They were using Owen and Talia's voices. She shuddered, recalling that eerie smile on faux Talia's face and the chorus of whispers from the dark. Kamal stepped forward, his expression steeled. We can't wait to be rescued. We must protect everyone here as best as we can. Starting tonight, we consolidate all guests and staff in one secure location. He pointed to a map on the wall. The main dining hall is the sturdiest building. We'll fortify it, set up all the lights we have around it, and keep everyone together. Nobody wanders off. Hal nodded weakly, still recovering his composure. Do it, and arm yourselves with whatever weapons, tools, anything. By afternoon, a tense operation was underway. Guests were informed there had been wild animal attacks, a half-truth to explain heightened security. Nervous crowds were escorted to the dining hall with their belongings. The hall was a spacious stone and steel structure, easier to defend than flimsy bungalows. Serena helped string up extra lights along the perimeter and inside. Determined to leave no dark corner, workers boarded up broad windows, leaving only narrow slits to peek through. Kitchens were raided for knives, maintenance for metal pipes, makeshift weapons in hands that had only ever held cocktail trays and golf clubs. Despite the fear, a grim resolve bound the survivors as dusk approached. Serena climbed to the hall's second level, where Kamau had set up a watch post on a balcony. From there, she could see the last hues of daylight bleeding out of the sky, and the black hemisphere already gleaming faintly above, heralding another moonless dark. Below, the resort grounds looked deserted, pools of floodlight shining on empty paths and shuttered villas. It was hard to tell if any of the golden-eyed creatures skulked beyond the tree line yet, waiting. Inside, dozens of guests and staff huddled together at tables or on the floor, speaking in hushed tones. Children were kept close to parents. Hal moved through the crowd, trying to project confidence with forced smiles and pats on shoulders, but he jumped at every stray noise. Night fell in earnest. The dining hall was islanded in light. Beyond its immediate vicinity stretched a wall of black. Hours crept by with unbearable slowness. Every creak of the building, every flicker of a bulb made hearts race. Around 11 p.m., just as some had begun to doze in exhaustion, the lights flickered. A collective gasp rose. Serena's head snapped up. The power wavered again, then returned to normal. Kamau leaned over the railing, whisper shouting to an electrician below. "What's going on?" "Generators acting up," came the anxious reply. "It should hold." Another flicker. The lights dimmed for a full 2 seconds this time, plunging the hall into semi-darkness before stabilizing. In that brief gloom, Serena thought she saw movement by the main door. She wasn't sure until a terrified scream rang out from below. One of the guests, an elderly man who had been sitting near the entrance, was now being dragged through the partially open doorway by a pair of hands. "Help, please," he shrilled, kicking desperately. Several people rushed forward. A woman grabbed the old man's arm, pulling with all her might. Serena caught a glimpse of the assailant. Pale, slender fingers locked around the old man's ankle and, beyond the threshold, 2 glowing eyes and a grin in the dark. "Hold him," Kamau shouted as he barreled down the stairs. 2 guards reached the doors, slamming their shoulders against them to narrow the gap. With a collective heave, they yanked the elderly guest back inside, and Mira threw her weight to shut the door. There was a furious hiss from outside as the creature lost its prize. "Lock it, now," someone yelled. They slid heavy bolts into place. The old man sobbed in pain, blood seeping from claw marks on his leg. One of the staff bent to staunch the wound. The hall erupted into panicked chatter. Serena helped Mira reinforce the barricade, heart hammering. Splinters of wood clung to the door, where those pale hands had pried it open. She knew it was only a first attempt. A muffled crash came from the opposite side of the building. Everyone went rigid. "They're testing the defenses," Kamau said under his breath, returning to Serena's side with rifle in hand. Suddenly, a terrible series of bangs reverberated from the rear emergency exit. Bang, bang, then silence. The pattern was too deliberate for the wind. The creatures were trying different entry points, looking for weakness. In the kitchen area, a window shattered. A chorus of shrieks came from that direction as glass sprayed. One of the cooks had been standing guard there with a carving knife and flashlight. In the blink of an eye, something yanked him halfway out the broken window. His scream gurgled wetly and was cut short as the darkness beyond the window seemed to swallow him. When panicked guests shone lights toward the opening, they caught a flash of a blood-smeared face pressed to the glass, too white, lips peeled back from bloody teeth, before it vanished with a mocking laugh. Chaos erupted. Several people began crying or shouting. "We have to get out. They'll kill us all," a man wailed, backing away from the compromised window. Hal tried to seize control. "Everyone, stay calm. Stay in the light. Don't." A new cacophony of shattering wood and screams came from the ceiling rafters. To Serena's horror, one of the creatures had dropped in from above, tearing through a weak spot where an air vent led outside. It landed amid a cluster of people, a gaunt, pale thing, with stringy black hair and blazing eyes. It let out a spine-chilling shriek, pandemonium. Guests stampeded away from the creature, knocking over chairs. In the commotion, the lights flickered yet again, and for an instant darkness strobed through the hall. When the lights returned, Serena saw the creature standing over a fallen woman, its clawed hand buried in her abdomen, blood pooled around them. The victim's eyes were wide and glassy, dead. Nearby, Mira had been thrown to the floor in the rush. Serena watched in horror as the creature's head snapped up from its kill and fixed on her friend. It smiled with blood-streaked lips. Before Serena could react, it pounced at Mira. Mira screamed as the creature grabbed her by the hair and arm, yanking her upward. Serena dashed forward, swinging a heavy flashlight like a club. She struck the creature's back with a dull thud. It barely flinched, but the impact made it turn its attention towards Serena. Up close, the stench of rot emanating from it was overpowering. "Mira, run!" Serena shouted. Dazed, Mira scrambled backward on hands and knees. The creature lunged for Serena now, swiping with talons. Serena stumbled, raising the flashlight defensively. A sharp pain ripped across her forearm as claws found flesh. She cried out, falling. A gunshot cracked. Kamal fired from the balcony, the bullet hitting the creature square in the shoulder. Black ichor sprayed from the wound. The thing howled and recoiled. Another shot. This one pierced its thigh, knocking it off balance. As it dropped to one knee, Mira, now behind it, seized the fallen carving knife and drove it into the creature's back with a desperate yell. The creature shrieked, twisting unnaturally to swipe at Mira. Its claws raked her across the throat in one horrific, casual motion. Mira gasped, blood spurting between her fingers as she clutched her neck. "Mira!" Serena screamed. Ignoring her own pain, she lunged to catch her friend as Mira collapsed. Around them, two more armed staff converged on the injured creature, bludgeoning it with metal pipes. With a snarl, the monster retreated in a scramble, leaping back up through the gaping hole in the rafters and disappearing into the night. Serena pressed her hands over Mira's wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Hot blood streamed through her fingers. Mira's eyes were wide with terror. She tried to speak, but only wet choking noises came out. Serena sobbed, begging incoherently for someone to help. One of the medics slid to their side, applying pressure with a cloth, but Serena could tell by his face that it was hopeless. Mira's golden brown eyes found Serena's. In them was pleading and fading light. Serena held her friend tightly as those eyes dulled and fixed, Mira's body giving one last shudder. Serena rocked back, a keening wail escaping her. Her best friend was gone, torn apart in front of her. All around, the dining hall was devolving into chaos. The creature was gone for now, but others still clawed at doors and walls. Another window crashed somewhere. Gunshots and screams rang out in the darkness. Hal, the manager, stumbled toward the center of the hall, ushering a cluster of guests ahead of him toward a pantry door. "This way, safe room in the pantry," he was shouting. As a group of people fled into the back pantry, a figure dropped from the ceiling behind Hal like a spider. "Hal, behind you," Serena cried out, voice hoarse. Hal spun too late. A tall, skeletal stranger with golden eyes wrapped an arm around his neck from behind. It ripped him off his feet with a brutal jerk. Hal's eyes bulged in surprise and pain as he was dragged, kicking, into the shadows of the kitchen. His screams gurgled, then fell silent. Kamal and two guards dashed after, disappearing into the kitchen with flashlights and weapons. For a moment, more gunfire, shouting, then a heavy silence. "Fall back and barricade," someone yelled. Those remaining in the hall, maybe 20 people, huddled together as others slammed shut the pantry door, and whatever entrances remained. Serena, numb with shock, allowed herself to be pulled into the pantry with the others. Someone closed the heavy metal door and locked it from inside. In the cramped pantry storage, lit by a single emergency lantern, Serena sat in a daze. Blood dripped from the gashes on her arm, but she hardly felt the pain. All she could feel was the weight of Mira's body that had been in her arms moments before, and the horror of knowing the creatures had infiltrated even their strongest refuge. Outside, in the main hall, inhuman wails echoed as the predators prowled among the carnage. Serena realized with despair that the fortified dining hall was no longer safe. Nowhere on Aurora Isle was safe anymore. A thin grey dawn crept over Aurora Isle on the 4th day. In the pantry safe room, the survivors sat slumped in exhaustion and grief until the inhuman shrieks outside finally ceased. Only then did they dare unbolt the heavy door. Serena stepped out, squinting at the dim morning light filtering through smashed windows and bullet-riddled walls. The dining hall was a charnel house. Blood was splattered across tiles and tables, and bodies, human and otherwise, lay strewn in grotesque tableau. Those creatures had not taken all their dead when they fled. Near the stage, Serena found the corpse of one of the golden-eyed fiends. It was sprawled halfway under a table, its twisted limbs scorched by floodlights that had re-illuminated at dawn. At first glance, it looked almost human, an emaciated man or woman. But the longer Serena stared, the more wrong it appeared. Its skin was ashen and stretched taut over angular bones. The fingers ended in ragged claws. The face could have been mistaken for a person's in poor light, but its mouth was too wide and filled with needle-like teeth. The eyes, now closed, had no lids, just a membrane of gold that caught the light. Kamal joined her, grimacing at the sight. "So, that's what we're up against," he muttered. One of the surviving guests, a middle-aged woman, approached hesitantly. "Is it dead?" she whispered. "As dead as it can be," Serena replied hoarsely. She nudged the body with a broken chair leg. It was limp, unmoving. A black tarry fluid oozed from its wounds. Blood, if it could be called that. The woman gagged and backed away. Kamal exhaled slowly. "We need to gather whoever's left and take stock. There might be more of these dead things around." In total, they found 3 creature corpses in the hall, including the one Serena and Kamal stood over. The rest of the monsters had retreated before full daylight, dragging some of their injured with them. Of the human survivors, only 19 remained. They moved like ghosts through the devastation, tending to the injured and covering the faces of the dead friends they recognized. Serena knelt beside Mira's lifeless form, where it lay near the wall. Someone had draped a tablecloth over her. Gently, Serena folded it back enough to see Mira's face. It was peaceful now, almost as if asleep, save for the pallor. Serena's chest constricted painfully. She brushed a blood-crusted strand of hair from her friend's forehead. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, voice cracking. There was nothing more to say. With trembling hands, she drew the cloth back over Mira's serene face, swallowing her sobs. She would have time to grieve later, if there was a later. The survivors convened in the least damaged corner of the hall. Kamal quickly assumed charge of security, coordinating a few uninjured staff to patrol the immediate grounds in daylight, searching for other survivors or hazards. Serena, cradling her bandaged arm, focused on the technical angle. Dev was among the survivors, shaken but alive, and he helped her set up a portable comm unit using spare parts scavenged from the guard radios and the control center's backup console. By mid-morning, they had a crackling link to the main island's emergency network. A voice came through, hollow with static but intelligible. It was an official from the planetary government, acknowledging Aurora Isle's distress call at last. Rescue operations are underway, the man promised. Multiple resorts reported violent attacks during the nights. We've dispatched security forces, but that black anomaly in the sky is disrupting transport and comms. Hold tight. Help will reach you within 48 hours. 48 hours. 2 more nights. Serena's heart sank as she and Kamau exchanged looks. They both knew in their gut that the group would not survive 2 more nights of this horror, no matter how many floodlights or bullets they had left. Kamau pressed the transmitter, voice tight. We don't have 48 hours. Are there any updates on removing the black sphere blocking the sun? There was a hesitation. Our scientists are still analyzing it, the official said. It's some kind of massive satellite or object at L1 position. All attempts to move or destroy it remotely have failed so far. Our planetary defense grid's solar-powered systems are compromised by its presence. We're considering a manned mission, but that will take time. Serena grimaced. The sphere was beyond their immediate reach or control, and it was the true source of their nightmare. She thanked the official and signed off, knowing they were essentially on their own for the coming nights. As the survivors absorbed the news, despair fell over many. A young man sank to the floor, head in his hands, mumbling that they were all doomed. An older couple held each other, crying softly. One of the resort staff swore under his breath, kicking a dented trash bin clear across the hall in frustration. Serena felt despair tugging at her as well, but a spark of defiance flared inside her chest. She refused to simply wait and die. Taking a deep, steadying breath, she addressed the group. "Listen to me, all of you," she began, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "Help is coming, but not soon enough. We survived last night by a thread. If we do nothing, these things will pick us off before rescue arrives." All eyes turned to her. In that moment, Serena realized she had become an unofficial leader through fate and loss more than any qualification. She continued, "I've worked on Aurora's environmental systems for years. The eternal sunlight wasn't just for tourist appeal. It was also a safeguard. I think those creatures cannot stand real sunlight. That's why they only came out after the sphere plunged us into darkness." Kamau nodded. "They were waiting for night to return," he said grimly. "Maybe they've always been here, hiding deep in the forests or caves during the long day. Now they feel this is their time." A shiver passed through the group as everyone considered the implication. The creatures had been lurking all along, right under their noses, for years. Serena set her jaw. If sunlight is their weakness, then we need to bring the sunlight back, even if the government can't yet, at least locally, here, tonight. Dev looked at her in confusion. "But the sun's blocked. How can we possibly?" "The orbital mirrors," Serena answered. Despite her fatigue, her mind now raced with possibility. Aurora Isle has a network of reflector satellites. They're still up there. The sphere is blocking direct light, but maybe we can angle some mirrors to catch sunlight peeking around its edges, or from a low angle. We might not get full daylight, but a concentrated beam, or even a false dawn, might be possible. She moved to a scorched holoprojector in the center of the hall and managed to get it working with a spare battery. A hazy schematic of the orbital mirror network flickered above the projector plate. Serena pointed at the cluster of dots representing satellites. "If I can manually override their programming, I could focus their reflection on a single point on the island. Essentially, we turn night into day in a targeted area for a little while." Kamau's eyes lit up with understanding. "We could lure those bastards into that area and fry them." A few others managed weak smiles or nods at the prospect of having a real plan, but Dev raised a concern. "We'd have to expose ourselves as bait, and what about the sphere? It's covering the sun. There might not be enough sunlight to reflect." Serena acknowledged the risk. It's true, we might only get limited light, but even a weak sunbeam is better than nothing. As for bait, she paused, looking around at the frightened, tired faces. Could she ask them to do that? The idea of purposely drawing those monsters in made her skin crawl, but there was no other way. They'll come for us regardless, she said softly. At least this way, we choose the battleground and have an advantage. Quiet determination gradually replaced some of the fear in the survivors' expressions. They had been cornered and terrorized. Now a chance, however slim, to fight back sparked a primal resolve. Over the next hour, Serena laid out the details. The old resort amphitheater on the east end of the property would be ideal. It was open and wide, with high-powered outdoor lights already installed, used for nighttime shows back when there were nights. They would reinforce those lights and tie them into the generator. Then, at the deepest part of the night, when the creatures were all out hunting, Serena would signal the satellites to create a concentrated blast of reflected sunlight over the amphitheater. If timed right, it could catch the creatures off guard and burn them badly, maybe even kill them. We have to make them all gather there, Kamau emphasized. If even a few stay away, we'll still be in danger tomorrow. We'll make sure they come, Serena replied, a hard edge in her voice. She thought of Mira's smile, of Danilo, Owen, Talia, Hal, so many gone in the blink of an eye. We'll be the bait, we'll broadcast sound, make noise, whatever it takes. They seem to know who we are, to remember us by name. Trust me, they'll come. As the plan solidified, a sense of purpose took hold among the survivors. Fear was still there, but it was now fused with anger and hope. They spent the rest of the day gathering what they needed: fuel for the generator, medicine for the wounded, weapons and tools. Serena and Dev relocated to the island's central control center, now deserted but intact, to begin reprogramming the mirror satellites for manual control. In the back of her mind, Serena felt the gnawing of dread and doubt. This plan could fail spectacularly, but doing nothing was certain death. As afternoon light waned once more, Serena stepped outside the control center and looked up at the sky. The black sphere still loomed, devouring the sun's face and casting the world in perpetual dusk. She allowed herself a moment of hatred toward that object, whatever it was, whoever had sent it. Then she steeled herself and returned to the task at hand. If all went well, by tonight, they would tear a hole in that darkness and expose the nightmares to the one force they feared: daylight. Night fell for the fourth time, bringing a suffocating quiet. Serena crouched in the control booth at the resort's open-air amphitheater, heart hammering. The survivors were in position, a small group huddled on the central stage as bait under a single lantern's glow, others hidden with weapons at key points. All the high-powered floodlights around the amphitheater remained off, ready to blaze on at the flip of a switch. Overhead, the black sphere devoured the stars, casting the world in deep gloom. For long minutes nothing stirred. The night air hung hot and still. Even the insects were silent. Serena's palms were slick on the switch's handle. Would the plan work, she wondered, forcing herself to breathe slowly. They had only one chance. Beneath the stage, someone stifled a cough. The tiny sound seemed thunderous in the stillness. A faint rustle came from the darkness beyond the amphitheater. Then, a sound of light footsteps on dry leaves. Serena's headset crackled as Kamau whispered, "I hear them. Steady." From the tree line, a sing-song voice floated out. "Serena," drawing her name in a playful call. It sounded like a young child. Another voice followed, a man's mocking chuckle. Come out, wherever you are." The words echoed, dripping with malice. Dev swallowed hard beside Serena. "They're here," he breathed. Silhouettes emerged at the edge of the open arena. Serena counted at least a dozen pale figures gliding out of the tree line, eyes glinting amber in the dark. Leading them was one in a tattered security uniform, the very creature that had dragged Hal to his death. It tilted its head as if sniffing the air, then bared its teeth in a corpse-like grin. One of the monsters stepped forward and called in a mock-sweet tone, "We've missed you all. Why hide? Come, let's play." The sight of that thing smiling, as if it were an old friend, made Serena's skin crawl. On the stage, Kamau abruptly stood and waved, taunting them. "If you want us, come and get us," he shouted, before ducking back behind cover. The response was immediate. The pack of creatures rushed forward with feral speed, eager to claim their prey. Some bounded on all fours down the grassy slope. Others leapt over benches with unnatural agility, their golden eyes fixed on the lantern and the humans around it, hunger and hatred plain on their distorted faces. "Wait for it," Serena whispered, forcing herself to count off the seconds. She had to draw them fully into the trap. Her heart pounded as the first of the monsters reached the foot of the stage, claws outstretched toward the decoy survivors. Now, Serena slammed the switch down. In an instant, night turned to day. The ring of floodlights around the amphitheater exploded with light, bathing the area in blinding brilliance. At the same moment, the satellites overhead delivered a concentrated beam of reflected sunlight from behind the black sphere, a spear of golden white radiance that pierced the darkness. The creatures never stood a chance. A chorus of unearthly shrieks erupted as the monsters were caught in the sudden blaze. The leader in the security uniform was mid-leap when the light hit. It howled as its flesh began to smoke and blister. Another nearby threw up its arms, its pale skin charring under the onslaught. There was no shadow or darkness left to escape into. Every corner of the amphitheater glowed like high noon. Several of the fiends dropped immediately, thrashing and convulsing as their bodies burned. One staggered blindly, its hair and skin aflame, and collapsed with a final ear-splitting screech. The stench of scorched flesh filled the air. On stage, the survivors watched in awe and grim relief. A few of the braver ones stepped forward to dispatch any twitching bodies with knives or makeshift spears. Kamau fired his rifle at a tall creature that still writhed, putting it down for good. In seconds, the onslaught that had terrorized Aurora Isle for nights was reduced to smoldering carcasses and ashes. But Serena's triumph was short-lived. Blinking against the searing light, she quickly counted the fallen. 8, 9. There had been more than that. Her eyes darted over the scene. Some of the monsters were missing, likely those that had hung back at the very edge of the trap. As if to confirm her fears, a furious snarl sounded directly below the control booth. Serena's blood ran cold. Two shapes, blackened and smoking but still alive, launched themselves up the rear wall of the booth, where the light was weakest. Somehow these two had skirted the perimeter of the floodlights and avoided total exposure until now. With a snarl, a lanky female creature, with half its face charred, pulled itself onto the ledge. Behind it, a larger, hunched figure clambered up, one arm smouldering from burns. Both were badly injured, their flesh cracked and oozing, but their golden eyes burned with undiminished rage. They lunged into the booth with guttural screams. Serena only had a heartbeat to react, as claws raked through the open window, reaching for her throat. Claws raked through the open window of the booth. Serena recoiled with a cry as the female creature lunged halfway inside. Charred lips peeled back from blackened teeth. Dev swung his wrench with a desperate yell, cracking it against the creature's skull. It snarled and swiped at him, its half-burned face peeling away to reveal raw muscle. Dev stumbled back, eyes wide. The larger monster heaved itself up over the ledge right behind the first. Its remaining hair was on fire, the skin of its arms charcoaled, but it was ferociously alive. With a guttural roar, it grabbed the frame of the booth window and tore it open wider, splintering wood and metal like kindling. Serena scrambled for anything to use as a weapon. Her hands fell on the heavy flare gun Dev had set down. As the female creature lunged at her again, Serena raised the flare gun and fired at point-blank range. With a whoosh, the magnesium charge erupted against the creature's chest in a blinding white flare. The monster shrieked an ear-splitting banshee wail as the chemical fire clung to its flesh. It fell back out of the window, thrashing and engulfed in sputtering white flames. In seconds it was reduced to a blackened, twitching heap on the ground below, the light in its golden eyes flickering out. Serena had no time to breathe. The larger creature let out a furious howl at the death of its kin. It lunged halfway into the booth, swinging a long arm. Its clawed hand caught Dev by the shoulder and dragged him forward with crushing force. Dev screamed as he was pulled toward the creature's gaping maw. "No," Serena shouted. She grabbed the first thing within reach, a steel pry bar they'd used to jam the door, and slammed it down onto the creature's forearm. The bone cracked under the blow, and the monster bellowed, releasing Dev. Dev slumped back, blood pouring from 4 deep gashes in his shoulder. The creature, eyes wild and furious, shoved its other arm through the window and seized Serena by the front of her jacket. Before she could break free, it yanked her bodily out of the booth through the shattered window. Serena hit the ground hard outside the booth, knocked breathless. The monster leapt down after her, its broken arm hanging at an odd angle. Half of its face was a scorched ruin, but the other half sneered with predatory glee. It straddled Serena where she lay and pinned her with its uninjured arm, its clawed hand wrapping around her throat. She gagged, nails scrabbling at the vice-like fingers crushing her windpipe. The creature leaned down, drooling black saliva from its maw. Serena's vision blurred as air and life were squeezed from her. In a last burst of defiance, she reached to her belt where a signal flare, smaller but still potent, was clipped. With trembling fingers, she jammed the flare stick upward, right into the creature's snarling mouth, and thumbed it on. The flare ignited with a sharp pop hiss, blasting burning phosphorus down the monster's throat. The creature reared back, releasing Serena as it clawed at its own face. White-orange fire and thick smoke billowed from its mouth and eye sockets. It gave a ghastly, gurgling scream. Serena rolled free, choking and gasping for air. Above, the reflected sunbeam still shone brightly, and one of the floodlights had rotated in the scuffle to bathe the area where they fought. The already burning monster stumbled directly into that light, its flesh charred to the bone in an instant. With one final fractured screech, it collapsed mere feet from Serena, twitching, as its body began to disintegrate into ash. Serena coughed and crawled backward, putting distance between herself and the smouldering remains. It was over. The last creature lay motionless, a dark heap against the brilliant glare of the floodlights. A sudden silence fell over the amphitheater, broken only by Serena's ragged breaths. Then voices. "Serena! Dev!" Kamal came sprinting around the side of the stands, one of the other survivors close behind. They had seen the final moments from below and were racing to help. Kamal's eyes darted between the charred corpse and Serena's bruised form. "Dear God, are you all right?" Serena nodded weakly, finding her voice in starts. "Dev, he's hurt." She crawled to Dev, who lay half in the booth, half out, clutching his shoulder. His face was pale, but he managed a pained grin as Serena and Kamal reached him. "I'm okay," Dev gasped, though blood trickled through his fingers. "Shoulder, it got me good." One of the medically trained staff arrived then, and immediately began binding Dev's shredded shoulder with strips of cloth. Around them, the surviving islanders gathered in cautious victory. The floodlights hummed, illuminating the eerie tableau of destruction. More than a dozen misshapen, blackened corpses of the creatures littered the amphitheater and stage. The acrid smell of burnt flesh hung heavy, but none of the monsters were moving. Those still alive had made certain of that. Serena realized she was still clutching the now spent signal flare in her trembling hand. She let it fall. watching the last fizz of chemical fire die out against the cement. A trembling laugh bubbled up from her chest, then turned into a sob. It was over. After 4 nights of terror, it was truly over. Kamal helped her to her feet gently. "We did it," he murmured, as if not quite believing it himself. Serena looked around at the faces of the haggard survivors in the harsh light. Some were crying, others laughing shakily or whispering prayers. The nightmare was over, and they were alive to see the morning. Above, the black sphere still loomed, but its darkness no longer felt absolute. The normal sounds of a tropical night were returning. Distant waves on the shore, a stirring breeze, the first tentative chirp of a cricket, and on the eastern horizon, beyond that orb of darkness, a faint glow began to herald the coming dawn. "Come on," Kamal said gently, guiding Serena and the others out of the devastated amphitheater. "Let's tend to the wounded and get ready to welcome the sun." His voice cracked with emotion on the last word. Shouldering each other for support, the survivors departed the scene of their victory. Behind them, the first light of true day began to spill over Aurora Isle, washing away the remnants of the festival's long, harrowing night. True dawn broke over Aurora Isle, with gentle golden rays, as if the sky itself were rejoicing. By the time the sun fully cleared the horizon, the black sphere had dwindled to a faint smudge against the light, and then vanished entirely, its purpose spent. Morning sunlight poured down on the island for the first time in days, painting the shattered resort in hues of warmth and hope. Serena sat on the front steps of the main hall, a blanket draped around her shoulders. Her throat was bruised and every muscle ached, but she was alive. Around her, the other survivors emerged to bask in the returning sun. Some closed their eyes and tilted their faces upward, letting tears roll unchecked. In the daylight, the nightmare seemed to retreat into the shadows of memory. Rescue crews arrived by mid-morning, the thrum of their shuttle engines announcing them. A medical team from the mainland hurried out, bringing water, blankets, and urgent care. They moved efficiently, wrapping wounds and tending to the injured. Dev was loaded onto a stretcher and flashed Serena a weak thumbs up, doped on painkillers but grinning. Kamal hovered near him, insisting he'd make a full recovery. An official with a clipboard, eyes wide at the evidence of battle all around, began taking careful account of casualties and missing persons. The numbers were sobering. Of the resort's guests and staff, less than a third remained. The rest were gone, lost to the horrors of the long night. Black body bags were laid gently over what remains could be found of the fallen, human and creature alike. She overheard on a rescue radio that similar attacks had occurred on other islands under the sphere's shadow, though none as severe as here. By afternoon, the survivors were ferried to a temporary camp set up on a safer part of the island. Despite the devastation, the resort's infrastructure still provided shelter and supplies. Under a large canopy tent, Serena sat on a cot and let a nurse tend to the cuts on her face and the bruises around her neck. She hardly heard the chatter around her. Her mind kept drifting to those who were not here. Mira, Hall Owen and Talia, Danilo, whom she'd never even known until he was gone. So many faces flashed in her memory. Serena reached into her pocket and found Mira's sunflower hair tie still looped around her wrist. She ran her thumb over it and allowed herself to mourn properly at last. Tears blurred her vision, but she did not wipe them away. They were a testament to everything they had lost. Kamal found her like that and sat quietly by her side. He didn't need to speak. His presence was comfort enough. Together, they watched the sun arc through a brilliantly blue sky that had once been eternally bright by design, then unnaturally dark. Now it was simply the honest sky, sun and clouds moving as nature intended. Serena had already sent a signal to shut down Aurora's orbital reflectors. Eternal daylight was no longer needed. Night would fall naturally tonight. A thought that made them tense at first, until they reminded themselves that darkness itself was not the enemy anymore. Authorities would sweep the island and surrounding forests thoroughly, of course. Kamal had already spoken with soldiers who planned to stay on patrol through the next few nights, just in case any straggling creature remained. But with each passing hour under the sun, it seemed more certain that the terror was truly over. That evening, as the sun began to dip, the survivors and rescue staff gathered on the western beach for an impromptu memorial. It felt right to hold it at sunset, the first real sunset Aurora Isle had seen in 10 years. They lit candles and torches in the rosy twilight, each flame swaying in memory of a life lost. Names were read, a roll call of tragedy, each name sending a ripple of grief through the crowd. Serena held Mira's hair tie tight in her palm and whispered her friend's name when it was called, tears slipping down her cheeks. When the last name was spoken, the gathered fell silent. The sky along the horizon burned orange and red, reflecting in the gentle waves. For a moment, Serena's heart clenched in fear as the colors of dusk deepened, old instincts still catching up to new realities. But as night fell naturally and softly, there was no resurgence of horror, only the sounds of the ocean and the breathing of those standing beside her. One by one, survivors used their candle flames to ignite floating paper lanterns. Dozens of them rose into the night, flickering beacons of remembrance and resilience. Serena released her lantern with a silent prayer and watched it join the others, drifting upward. The darkness was no longer something to dread. It was simply a backdrop for their collective hopes, and the glowing lanterns carrying messages to the stars. As the first stars pierced the night sky above the island, Serena stepped to the water's edge. The cool surf lapped at her feet. In the rippling reflection of the constellations on the water, she almost expected to see a pair of golden eyes staring back. But there were none. There was only her own face, tired and haunted, yet hopeful, illuminated by starlight and the soft glow of lanterns. Kamal approached, offering a gentle hand on her shoulder. "How are you holding up?" Serena managed a small smile. "I'm not sure," she admitted, empty, relieved, grieving. She let out a shaky breath. "But I think we'll be okay." Kamal nodded, his gaze on the rising lanterns. "We will, day by day." They stayed for a while, two survivors under the night sky, until the last lantern was just a speck of light among the stars. Finally, Serena turned to leave the beach and join the others by the fires. Tomorrow, evacuation ships would take them back to the mainland. Aurora Isle would need time to heal, and so would they. Before she left, Serena cast one last look at the horizon, where sea met sky, now cloaked in peaceful darkness. The festival of eternal sunlight had become a night of terror none would ever forget, but dawn had come again, and with it, the promise that even the darkest nights pass with the rising of the sun. In the weeks that followed, Aurora Isle began the slow process of healing. Investigators combed through every corner of the island's forests and caves. No additional creatures were found. Whatever nightmare had been unleashed was gone for good. Scientists remained baffled by the black sphere that had eclipsed the sun. It had vanished with the dawn, leaving only speculation in its wake. Some suspected an alien construct, others an ancient entity driven off by the return of daylight. The truth, like so many scars left on the survivors, would take time to uncover. The resort remained closed, damaged buildings were repaired, and memorials were erected for those who perished. The corporate owners of Aurora Isle quietly announced that the geo-orbital mirrors would not be reactivated. The era of eternal sunlight was over. From now on, the island would know honest sunrises and sunsets like any other place. It was a small concession to nature, and perhaps an unspoken apology for the arrogance of banishing the night. Serena stayed on the mainland for a time to recover. In quiet moments, she often found her mind drifting back to the island. She would suddenly recall the hush before the attack, or the way the golden-eyed woman had smiled with Mira's voice. Some nights she woke in a sweat, thinking she heard someone calling her name from the darkness, but each time, reality soothed her. She was safe. The horrors were past. Support groups formed for the survivors, and Serena kept in touch with many of them. Dev's shoulder healed after surgery, and he sent her a joking message that he planned to frame the battered wrench that saved his life. Kamal decided to remain on Aurora Isle to help with rebuilding and security. In one of his letters, he mentioned the sunsets. They were beautiful and strange after so many years of unending day. He invited Serena to visit when she felt ready. It took nearly a year before Serena found the strength to return. On the anniversary of that awful night, a gathering was held at Aurora Isle, not a festival, but a remembrance. As the sun set over the rejuvenated resort, Serena walked along the beach where the perpetual daylight had finally given way to evening. The sky burned orange, then purple, then deep indigo. She felt her heart rate spike as the last light slipped below the horizon, but then the stars blinked gently into view, and nothing emerged from the shadows except the soft whisper of the tide. Serena joined Kamal and a few others at a bonfire on the sand. They shared stories and quietly toasted the friends they had lost with raised glasses. There was sorrow, yes, but also gratitude. They had faced the darkness and survived. As the flames crackled and the tropical night settled comfortably around them, Serena found herself gazing at the tree line. For just a moment she imagined she saw a pair of luminous golden eyes beyond the glow of the fire. Her breath caught, but when she blinked, the illusion was gone, leaving only swaying palms and the gentle night. She let out a long breath and managed a smile. The terror of that night would never be forgotten, but it no longer held her in its grip. Turning back to the warmth of her friends and the firelight, Serena felt a sense of peace. Above, the stars shone bright over Aurora Isle, eternal beacons in the darkness, and on the breeze came the distant laughter of new guests enjoying the island, their voices full of life. The night was no longer an enemy, it was simply night, and the world had woken to a new dawn.